Something unusual happened at first service during the sermon. During the sermon, I had somebody actually approaching the pulpit, which is kind of, nowadays, when that happens, you have to be, a little bit more alert than you might have had to have been, 20 years ago or something like that. Turns out it was Lynn Morgenstern. And so that was okay, but she could tell I was needing some water really bad. And so she came with a bottle of water for me, and I was very appreciative. But I figured Lynn was pretty safe for her to come forward. But it does make you think in ways you had probably never thought of before. Let's join together in prayer. Dear God, we see Jesus making an approach as well today. He's approaching the great city, the holy city, Jerusalem. And we see in him something that we don't always see in people. Peace, an understanding, a sense of appreciating everybody and yet at the same time being above it all. Help us, O God, on this particular day to see Jesus in Jerusalem anew. Amen. For those of you who have been in the adult class, some of you will recognize the name Frederick Buechner, and the class has looked at a couple of his books over the years. One of his probably most popular books was a book that he wrote called The Faces of Jesus. And it's a book that has the text by Mr. Buechner, but a lot of the book is actually illustrations of paintings, of sculptures, of etchings and carvings of different faces of Jesus from different cultures at different times in the Christian story and from different nations. A few of the pictures are pictures of Jesus on Palm Sunday, during the Palm Sunday scene. And the face of Jesus on Palm Sunday seems different in some ways, because here Jesus comes into the city, and this is his big triumphal scene. And in a number of these pictures, Jesus comes across, at least as I see these pictures, as kind of the epitome of humility and the epitome of peacefulness. It's kind of like a quiet holiness, or a peaceful invasion. It's interesting what's going on at the time. Some commentators have said that as Jesus approaches Jerusalem from the east, from the Mount of Olives and from Bethany, has come down the Kidron Valley and then comes up from the Kidron Valley into the eastern gate of Jerusalem, at some point or other, Pilate's soldiers have come in from the west, from Caesarea, to make sure that there is law and order during the course of these tumultuous festivities, the biggest time of festivity in the city of Jerusalem. And those kind of counter experiences and counter agents as they approach Jerusalem are in some ways very stark and striking. You can imagine hearing all around the city the hooves and the marching, and even if you listen carefully, the branches of palms waving and then being placed on the ground. It is an amazing time during the city of Jerusalem. Any Passover time would be an amazing time. This past Wednesday, I was able to go to Central United Methodist Church downtown on 25th and Wisconsin Avenue. Our bishop, Hee-Soo Jung, was there, and he was engaged that evening in a conversation and a dialogue with a fellow by the name of Hilmi Oker. Hilmi Oker. Hilmi is a member of the Turkish and Turkish-American community here in Milwaukee, and he's a part of the what's called commonly the Niagara Foundation, which sponsors a lot of Muslims who are from Turkey and Americans who are Turkish in background. The two of them, Hilmi and our bishop, talked about the attitudes that are especially needed right now to be able to have a meaningful conversation especially between Christians and Muslims, but really for all people who are conversing who have different faith backgrounds. They also said that the same attitude is needed for people who are of different political backgrounds. I think we've sort of all experienced that in some ways the differences of faith are mirrored by all of the, all of the differences and sometimes arguing between people of different political backgrounds and ideological divides. We have, it seems like, at least this is my perception, we have so much division right now in our nation, so much animosity. I get the feeling sometimes that everybody is in a bad mood all of the time. It's like everybody's gone crazy simultaneously. And the problem, it's not with me, the problem is always with somebody else. Somebody else's viewpoint, somebody else's ideology or philosophy just is not correct and not up to my snuff. Bishop Jung and Hilmi Okas were saying that the only way to get out of this is for us to learn some of the simple things that are common to all of our faiths, including the Christian and Muslim faith. And they included these things. How do you be humble? How is a person humble? How do you listen? Because gosh, it seems like nowadays hardly anybody really has the capability of listening, really listening to somebody else. Everybody's writing something, or everybody is talking without really listening to what their conversation partner is saying. Everybody's looking at a screen of some kind. But how do we really humbly listen to somebody? As a Christian might say, and Bishop Jung said this, how can we be a little bit more like Jesus? How do we ask questions? How do we listen? How can we be present for other people where they are in their lives at this time? Jesus came with a sense of humility, and at the same time, it was a kind of a sense of a peaceful invasion of something different coming into the room. In this case, of something different coming into Jerusalem. Now, if I had to list the 10 most influential theologians in my life, and I know when I mention that you're all excited to hear about that. Larry in particular is at least, anyway. But spare me a moment here. One of my favorite theologians, at least one of my top 10, I would say, would be Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman is interesting for no other reason that he founded the first racially integrated and intercultural church, intentionally so, in San Francisco. This is earlier part of the 20th century. And then after that, he was asked in his career, maybe this is where my prejudices come into play, he was asked to be the dean of the chapel at Marsh Chapel at Boston University. And he became a kind of spiritual mentor to Martin Luther King when King was pursuing his doctoral studies. Howard Thurman once asked in one of his meditations the question, and I think it's really a great question. He said, what was Jesus thinking about when he was on that donkey and all that stuff was happening around him? where all the clamor was going on, and people were cutting branches and waving them out in front of him. They were singing these hosannas. But what was really Jesus thinking about when he was riding on that donkey? Thurman made several suggestions, but the one that's really struck me was this. Thurman said maybe Jesus was thinking about his mom. Maybe he was thinking about his mom, or mother, I guess Thurman actually says. How much he really loved her. How he wished that he didn't have to necessarily go through these things that he's going to be going through very shortly. And how much, if this all happens and transpires as he expects, how much he's going to miss her and how hurt she's going to be. I like this idea about Jesus thinking about his mom at a moment like this. Because remember, the first time that he came to Jerusalem was with his mom and dad. For the first time they experienced the high holy days of Passover in Jerusalem. Remember the time when Jesus came and got so involved in talking to the leaders and the priests in the temple that mom and dad forgot him and was started on their way home a couple days and had to come back and berate him because he wasn't listening to mom and dad. One of my delights as a pastor is when I'm able to see people grow in their faith. When they learn from a person who, it might be a parent, it might be a grandparent, it might be someone whom they respect or look up to in the congregation, but they begin to take